Okay, I'm going to call the order then. Start with the agenda. Any concerns for the agenda, or is there a motion to approve it?
So moved.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
All in favor? Opposed? Okay, approved. Now, in this next section, the informational section for us, anybody have any questions on any of the information? Yeah. Not seeing any questions. We're going to move on to the safety minute cool moment.
All right, so for a couple cool moments, Crystal and I had met with a member, Tim Huguenot, who we had sat down with and talked about, he complimented the Indiana Connection magazine. It was kind of interesting to talk to him about how to reach to folks like himself and the fact that he doesn't use a computer, doesn't really open his bills, and thought that that was the way that we need to communicate to that type of crowd. And so, number one, I thought it was a good engagement to hear that. Number two, it sparked some thoughts around when we do town halls and some of these educational event type engagement events next year, that to get some of those, I think it's like $25 a page to add a page other than what we typically, the regular printed pages in the Indiana Connection. So I think it gets us thinking about some opportunities to transcribe some of the other events that we do and to maybe include those in there. The second one, which I thought was really, really cool, we acknowledged Brian in our staff meeting. He was on lunch at Pizza King, and if anyone knows Brian Amrine, he's quiet yet a man of selfless service and concern for his community. He was actually eating lunch at Pizza King. A man started choking. Brian jumped up, started performing Heimlich maneuver, and was able to clear the man's airway before the ambulance got there. Brian did not tell us this. We had actually an anonymous member that called in. He had his RAMC uniform on, and so they wanted us to know that. And so if you see Brian, I think that's really cool. We acknowledged him, and just neat to see that, that's one of our core principles as community, and Brian never thought twice and jumped in there. So I thought that was awesome. A couple safety minutes, just a reminder on job site visits. No matter what, if we're on a job site, and this is for employees, directors, doesn't matter. If you're on a job site, it's all of our responsibilities to take care of each other. And one thing you have to remember is if we have line crews working in the lines, whether they're in a bucket, repairing lines, doing whatever, we have to be cognizant that if something happens with that line, or that line would happen to fail, that one of the safety guidelines is that there's nobody under that line. So, a couple things is that the line crews are in charge of making sure that that's what the groundsman is to do, is to make sure that there's no one underneath the lines. And so we just have to be cognizant of that also, that if I'm out there, if any director's out there and we're on a job site, we need to be looking out for each other, because that is a huge safety concern. So just keep that in mind. Second is something that IEC actually sent. Just a little reminder of, if you use real trees, which I know we do, my kids love it every year, LED lights and making sure you keep the thing fresh is important. You don't want any house fire. So I thought that was kind of cool and something that we could bring up as a safety moment.
Thank you. Yep. Previous minutes. Everyone have a chance to review them? Should have. Any questions on them?
The special meeting, is it recorded, or am I missing? And I'm probably missed it.
No, you didn't. It'll be on next month's week. So we'll approve that as a part of next month's meeting minutes, basically.
But wouldn't that clean up the refund questions?
I think the refund questions are,
Wasn't there a motion? And again, yeah, there was a motion made and seconded in here, and people are going to think they're going to get $50. Well, they're not going to get that.
here's what we were told when we asked that question is it was a motion that you guys made and approved. It was contingent, but it can't be amended at that point. It was more of do a motion to rescind and then.
I just think it would be best if we included our special meeting minutes with this, so that doesn't create.
I don't disagree with that, but I don't know that they got in.
We did get them from Brian, but no, we haven't, legal, nobody's reviewed them, but I can throw them out.
We send them out tonight, we review them tomorrow, and then I just think if it's all together, it's gonna,
I agree.
otherwise people are gonna say, why didn't I get my $50?
Right. I am okay with that if we can get it with you. If it's not tomorrow, but
I can actually send them out tonight, honestly.
okay. Let's do that. But we will need everyone to respond to that.
I'm good with that. I just think it's gonna save us a lot of confusion.
I agree.
Understand, no problem with that. Any other questions on the minutes?
I'll send it out tonight and then I'll ask for basically just an email that's going to say, hey, please vote back, approval, disapproval. If there's something you want to change, just say, please, I recommend this change and I'll resend it out.
Okay.
That way we can coordinate it. I haven't even looked at what Brian sent yet, but I'll just send out what he sent. So it has to go through legal yet. Just remember that. But
Okay.
yeah, I agree.
Okay. Motion to approve the minutes?
Move to approve.
Steve, is there a second?
I'll second.
Carl? All in favor? Those minutes approved. We will try to approve our special meeting by email in the next couple of days. Okay. Moving on to the CEO reports.
Yeah, so a couple things. It's been, again, a busy month. We really spent most of the time preparing the budget, which you received tonight. My plan is to go ahead and I'll upload on call to order also, so you have a electronic copy. I don't know, is there a necessity to send it through email or not? But I think we usually just send it out on call to order and then you all got a hard copy tonight of it.
That'll be sufficient.
Yeah, that's what I was kind of thinking. So again, we spent time getting that budget. I'd like to shout out to Eric. Eric was a huge piece of putting this together. Obviously incorporated some changes as we saw fit. So I think you'll like it. We also worked on the union negotiations, obviously. So we'll be looking at that tonight. And then the last two things, my team completed a risk management review, which was the third quarter risk management review. And we actually completed two of our strategic input meetings. One was with Hoosier Energy and one with CFC. And the way those went is we kind of listened to them, asked some questions, and then we put some common themes that we heard as far as, risk and opportunities up on the board. Those are getting wrote up now. They'll go back to the team for kind of a review. And we have another one, I think, next week, which is in our ECA. And then the rest of them will be towards the beginning of the year. As far as project updates, our front lobby security upgrade project is moving along. The contract's finalized the samples. They're awaiting a few items to come in. So Crystal's heading that and it's moving forward. The construction work plan projects, the reconductoring job up north's underway. It's planned to be completed by the end of the year. Also, the prior to 2019 pole replacements are being worked, and it's going to be tight, but at this point, we still think we're going to have that completed by the end of the year. I'm going to jump into metrics. So October's median temperature was down about 10% from our 4-year average. So it was 52 degrees compared to 57. So it was a little cooler. Nothing really stands out in the cooling degree days or the which is heating degree days, although the heating degree days obviously were a little higher than our 4-year average. Daily SAIDI is consistent with our, basically our average. And really the only major event so far this year has been, and I shouldn't say that, I should knock on wood, but the major event is April 8th, and we really haven't had anything cross that threshold since then. Although the last windstorm it showed up as a blip, it didn't cross over the major storm. And then our lost consumer hours and number of outages is really in line with our 4-year averages for October. Didn't really see anything there abnormal. Disconnects for October are more in line with a normal October. So if you looked at the disconnects metrics, it's more in line. And then our AR 30, 60, 90 is coming closer to our past averages. Eric and I were even talking about how that impacts overall financials, and really it's non-material at this point. Obviously, there's going to be folks that won't be able to pay their bill, and that will be a little bit of a higher dollar value, we feel like, from a write-off standpoint, but I don't think it'll be, we're not expecting anything material on that. So that is my update, unless there's any questions on projects or metrics.
Any questions on any of that right now?
Right.
Okay, then we'll move on to Eric and the financial update.
Okay. So since we're spreading out for COVID so far away from that screen, it might be hard to see the numbers on there. So I'll make sure I know which document I'm talking about if you want to follow along on your iPad. So the first one on the financial update is the financial statement key lines. So page 2 of that, again, that's sort of the summary of my comments of what I see in the main different financial statements that for the month of October. So if there are any questions or comments about those, feel free as we're going through this to ask those, or at the end, wherever makes sense to you all. If nothing specifically on that, the next page of that same document is called balance sheet key lines. So the month of October was pretty flat from a balance sheet standpoint. The only really significant thing you see on here is the net utility plant went up about $300,000, and our current accrued assets went down $362. Basically, this was plant investment for the month. We had about $400,000 of plant investment. So cash we spent on the plant and on general type items. Actually, it was the majority of it was the digger truck that we bought and the staker's truck that we purchased. Not stakers. Yeah, it's a staker truck that we bought this month. So that's really the only item to note on the balance sheet. Overall, it was pretty flat, within $100,000 for the month of October. The next sheet is a statement of operations key lines. So in the month of October, so in the middle section of that, gross margin, we were within about 70,000 of the budgeted gross margin. We were above the budgeted gross margin by about 70,000 bucks. But then our controllable expenses right below that were over by 40,000. And that's some of the catch up that I talked about that was going to happen over the coming months from in that particular category. And all that comes down to, there's a row in there called patronage capital and operating margin. So basically our operating margin for the month of October, we were about 30,000 above what we had planned for the budget. We were right about 63,000 versus a budget of 31. If you go over to the right-hand side in the year to date, third row down is the gross margin. If you go all the way to the right, you see that we're 79,000 ahead of plan, about 1%. So about 1% ahead of what we budgeted from a gross margin perspective. The next row down is the controllable expenses. This is the area that far right number, it's negative 414 right now. It was about 450 negative 450,000 last month. So we've ate into that variance a little bit. Still at this point, planning on that being right around 350 is what I'm thinking as of year end, where we're going to land in the controllable expense variance. Then as you move on down to the patronage capital and operating margins, you see that we're at 1,073,000 operating margin against a budget of 537. So 536,000 above budget at this point of the year. Once we have that the bill credit that we've talked about, that will all impact this number and start to drive that overall variance to budgeted margin down. The last page in that document is the cash flow summary. In the top right corner of that, you see the net change in cash for the month and for the year to date. So you see the current month, it's a negative 447,000. So that's how much our overall cash balance decreased in the month of October. You look in the middle column and the current month column, in the middle section, you can see under the cash received, we had about $2.8 million of cash came in the door in the month of October. And then in the lower section, you see that we had about 3.2 million of cash going out the door. The main driver of that is in the middle. There's the 415,000 of utility plant investment, which the majority of that was the purchase of the vehicles this month. Overall, year to date, we're about still 500,000 ahead or more cash than where we ended last year. And then in the year to date column, you can see what makes that up. Nothing particularly stands out to me in that given. In that category this month. Questions or comments on that particular document? Okay, if we move on to the next one and call to order is the statement of operations detail. Just hit some things real quick in this. The first page of that after the title page is the gross margin metrics. Just call your attention to the bottom right graph. That shows where we are year to date from a gross margin perspective, as it's been for several months. On as many millions of dollars of gross margin that we have, we're off by 70,000, but you can barely see it in that line. So overall, that tells us we've held pretty close to our gross margin budget year to date in 2020. The next page of that is just a summary of some of the breakdown of the kilowatt hours and sales. Top left graph of that shows that we're about 27 million kilowatt hours behind what we had budgeted, and you can see the breakdown of those. It equates to about 8.8%. Behind where we had planned. That bottom left graph, the pie graphs, that one's growing on me, and I hope that it kind of will on you guys too. Just kind of for perspective on this. Sure. So that left hand, the right hand side, the bluish color. So that 13.1, 46% for the actual, and the 13.3 and the 45% in the budget. So 1% doesn't seem like much. But what this is trying to show is where the revenue's coming from, which revenue classes, and that significantly impacts things. So rough math, right now, we've got $28 million of charges that we've had year to date. So 1% of that is $280,000. If you just do real rough math, make that let's say $300,000. In the residential category, our gross margin's about 40% on charges. So that's about 120 grand. In an industry side, that the margin of what we make is about 10%. So it's about $30,000. So there's $100,000 difference by having that revenue in one category versus the other category. So that's what that graph is trying to help show, is kind of where the revenue is versus where we budget the revenue, which will impact the gross margin.
Just to put that in perspective from what you and I have talked, that's payer class. I mean, so shift in payer class in the healthcare industry obviously has effect on our bottom line. Same amount of revenue shifted from one class to the other can make a huge difference.
Shifting kilowatt hour sales in residential versus commercial and industry is significant impact to us. And the bottom right just shows the gross margin, stacking it on top of each other, where it comes from throughout the three main classes that we look at from that standpoint. Next page is controllable expense metrics. Not really going to say much about that. It's pretty well consistent with what it's been over the previous months. The same areas we think we're going to be under for the year is still consistent with what I said in the past. The following pages of that document just go through the individual departments and give you all a little more detail about those. And the very last page shows a breakdown of the operating margin and cumulative and where we stand versus that. This one tells me the last 3 months, the green line's pretty flat. So we've held pretty flat from an operating margin for the last 3 months. The May through August is what has put us so far over from an operating margin standpoint. So that's all I was going to mention in that particular document. The next one down is the plant investment. So this is, again, just tracking budget versus actual. We held what we thought we were anticipated spending in the month of October is what we actually spent in the month of October. So we're still on track to have the same variance that we anticipated. The areas at the bottom of that graph I would call to your attention on the left-hand side where there's not green, but there's orange. So the distribution work plan projects and the pole replacement catch-up. Those are the two areas that we have some work to get done. And we're still anticipating, from my understanding, talking with folks to get done by the end of the year. And then on the right-hand side, you see the first one's the vehicles, that's all green now. So we did purchase those two vehicles at this point in time. And the very last document, I thought I'd continue to show this one. It's basically the cash and financing sheet that I started showing last month. It just sort of tracks our cash balance so because we know it's all higher and we know it's high and we're trying to work that down. And basically what this one shows you is that last section that's ticking down in the green that we hit pretty close to what we thought we were going to hit in the month of October, but that was a lot of from a vehicle standpoint. So these next 2 months will really tell the tale of where we stand as far as getting our distribution plant projects done to decrease that cash balance to where we said it was going to be at the 1.3 million. Questions, comments?
I have some comments, but not regarding the report.
Sure.
We spoke briefly to the auditor when he did his presentation on taking our year from 1/1 to 12/31. Main reason to coincide with the 990. And I know we throw around that word transparency a lot. Brett talks about it a lot. Our members are requesting it. As a board, we should require it. I think that might be, in my opinion, and after discussing with Joe briefly during the audit and some emails, I would like to make a motion to do a partial year audit in 2020, ending 12/31, and move the annual audit to be conducted 1/1 to 12/31. This would coincide the 990, the Form 7, the audit, and what we publish to our members. So there's no questions on what those numbers are. And that's the motion I would like to make this evening.
I will second that motion.
Is there any discussion on that motion?
I would like to just reveal just some highlights, and I will forward this to you. There's no significant financial advantage to this, which that's not on my mind. It's a transparency. It's when people ask, what's this number? And I tell them to go look at the 990, that we can say, this is what's submitted to the government. This has been audited, and this is what the members get. So that it's not a financial benefit. RUS does have to approve it, but Joe said he's done it twice and there's been no problems doing that. He said RUS is pretty much aware of that. If we go to a fiscal year, and Eric, if we go to a fiscal year, we would end on the end of May. Our annual meeting has been June the last 2-3 years. That's too close to the annual meeting to get published. And I know fiscal year is sometimes better for auditors, better for accountants, but on the average overall look, most people are used to the 1/1 to 12/31. I get the fiscal year. I appreciate fiscal years. But for the average person looking, I just think those are and he did say they are, it's going to cost more because they have to go back to the balance sheet. So the first year it'll cost more, but we're looking at these substantial numbers we have right now. And if that's something we're on our mind, I just wanted to make the motion. We talked about it briefly, and I wish I would have done it back when he was doing it, but just after some thought, that's why I would like to make that motion. Know what your thoughts are, Eric?
It was one of the first questions I asked when I started here of why we have a year in that we have and what was involved in changing it if we could change it, because I do think it, from a clarity, just easier to understand and things being on the same. There's all the way we do things now. There's so much, everything's got to be go take this, back out this, add this in to get back to this number to coincide with all the documents that we file with the government. So from a clarity standpoint, I think it would make a lot of sense to potentially look at that. We would be looking at some, I don't want to say substantial. I don't know what the number would be. A typical audit for us is around 11, I think it was 11,500, 12,000, something in that area is what it was for this year. So I would assume we were probably 20 to 30,000 probably to do it. Maybe that might be high. Don't quote me on.
Maybe higher because of the balance sheet audit they would have to do.
Okay. We could definitely reach out to him. Yeah. Understand.
There's no financial gain on this. I don't want to make, this is nothing financial that's going to help us. It's just the transparency and communication. And most minds work on a calendar year. So that's why, I mean, I'm not trying to get a financial advantage or disadvantage. It's just a matter of what's published to the members on our annual meeting is the same thing that's on the 990 that the IRS has received. So it's just more the, not basically keeping two sets of accounting records.
Suzanne, I don't know, there may be some actual financial advantage too. I mean, it is a pain for us, from a process standpoint. I mean,
It has to be. I mean, Eric's time is people's time. I mean, two sets.
I agree with that. I am going to make a request. I would like to continue discussion on this, but I would request that we vote on it next month.
That's fine. I just wanted to get it before the year end.
Okay.
He did tell me, because I was curious what the other REMCs do, and I told him I was going to reach out to them, and he said, well, I'll take care of it for you. They are on fiscal year. Jackson, Bartholomew, WIN, June 30th, July 31st, September 30th. And that's fine. And he put on there, there's not a significant financial benefit, but I think on the calendar year for our members, that could just dot some ends of sentences and answer some questions when we say it's been audited, it's been submitted to the IRS, and it's on our Form 7. So I think that would be the way to go. And I know we need to step back and not vote maybe on the night, but just something to pursue and get Eric's feedback on that. So I appreciate that.
I think it would make a lot of sense. I would guessing, having done what they do, our audit fees will go up slightly on an annual basis and slightly by, well, I would guess less than $1,000. The accountants are busy at year end because a lot of people are on year end doing taxes and that sort of thing. They like doing audits in June and July because they're not busy. So they're trying to get any business that they can. So it could not material enough, in my opinion, to change any decision we would make, but it was just something that would.
Is there a date you have to have the audit? I mean, my mind with this was the annual meeting and the publish of those numbers, the annual meeting. Is there another deadline that I'm not aware of that you have to have the audit done? As long as they have it done in time for us to publish it for the annual meeting?
Right.
Or is there another time? I didn't know how that worked.
I don't remember the number of days, but I think our US might say so many days after the end of our fiscal year, which wouldn't really, whenever your fiscal year is, or your period end, I guess I should say, it would be, I think it's 60 days, but that's kind of either way. If we do it in May or if we do it in December, it's going to be 60 days. So that really doesn't change anything for us.
Okay.
yeah, that's what I would suggest though, is the things that we need to dig into, the resources and just our time to do it. And then just make sure we don't miss any things like that. But I think it makes a lot of sense.
I think that will help answer some questions.
Dale?
Well, just for clarity, so we're talking about a short year audit, right?
Correct.
Okay, that's going to cost us, and we, again, the amounts up in the air. We don't know what that amount is. But we have signed a 2 or 3 year contract with them for Monroe Shine for the next couple of years. And you're suggesting, Eric, and Suzanne, I don't know if you talked to him, the fees will minimally increase, or it's expected they would minimally increase.
I don't know.
All of that.
I don't know about that 1 year. And I don't know. I just wanted to bring that to your guys' attention when we probably he's going to want our business. So he's probably going to be okay with keeping that contract and not trying to push us on money there. My guess is the next time around when we sign a contract, we'll be looking at a little more money, not enough, hundreds, maybe $1,000, not a lot, a little bit.
He said it's because the reason it was going to go up for the first year is because he'll have to do an audit of both balance sheets on a regular year. So he'd have to do a balance sheet for 18 and then a balance sheet audit for 19 on the calendar year, not the fiscal year. That's why and since we have the funds this year and we've kind of briefly talked about it, I wanted to get it out there before the year end.
I think I
Makes a lot of sense.
like you guys to sort of feasibility on our end before we vote on that. I think Suzanne said it's okay if we table this till next month.
Yeah, I thought before the year end.
So I forget about Jason. Jason, you have any comments? Speak up if you do. Okay, so we are going to table this until December and
Would we be voting on it then on the 8th when we have it?
probably would be the actual meeting,
Okay.
the board meeting.
Would that allow enough time for us to contact the auditors, or I don't know what time frame?
Yeah, I've made a note. I can email him tomorrow. Sorry. I can email him tomorrow and
To see if if we can the 8th, or if, we have to do it soon. I don't know what the time frame he's on to get us scheduled in, what his calendar looks like for the spring audits, or how far out he's scheduled.
For the partial.
For the partial, I don't know how far out he's scheduled. That's why I thought we might want to consider it the 8th, so that if he's already scheduled out for the partial audit, just as a,
We can find out. I mean, let us do some feasibility. If so, I say we do it the 8th, right?
I'm fine with that if you guys can get that done for us by then.
try, see.
Yeah, exactly. It's not possible, it's not possible, but. Okay, other questions on finances? Okay, then we're going to move on to policy review of 10-3, the sick leave. As you can see, looking to make a few changes to all the credits.
Yeah, so I can go through this. So as a part of our COVID response and kind of just when we originally went through this, we automatically told everyone, if you need this time, we're not going to wait to accrue it. Let us know and we'll allow you to use that. The other thing is the union folks per the contract, they basically get all their sick leave at the beginning of the year. So what we were thinking was just to clean this up and say everyone gets theirs at the beginning of the year. The one edit I would make to what's out here is just a clarification. So if you see the second sentence under where it says for employees working less than 40 hours per week, the 7 hours, I would remove that 7 because I think that confuses things. Basically what we're trying to say there is if you're a part-time under 40 hours, you're not going to get the 84 hours. You're going to get it prorated for whatever it is that you do work. So the only change I would suggest above this red line is to take the 7 out. Just scratch that and go from 3 hours, 7s, right?
No, just out. You're just scratching the word hours.
No, 7.
Oh, 7, I'm sorry. Just the word 7.
The hours will be, okay.
Great.
Yeah, because when you scratched that out from A, it didn't make sense to leave that in there, so I agree with.
Yeah, just scratch the 7.
Okay.
So the only change here again is instead of on an accrual basis, we're going to allow them to use their sick time whenever they basically want it. Again, it aligns with what we do with the union contract. It's more of a cleanup than anything.
Any issues with this? Is there a motion to approve the red lines? The addition of the removing the word 7.
So moved.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Jason. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Okay. The next is the budget ask that was first mentioned last month, updating the boardroom with better visual. So it's on our iPads.
We did not update this, but as you guys know, we're going into Black Friday. And I think we could get a few $100 off of what you see quoted here. We didn't update it because we don't know exactly what that looks like, but I'm assuming we would hold out and see until we can get some really good pricing on that screen. Again, this is to do the reason you're seeing all this stuff kind of laying everywhere is because right now we're basically traveling with it between the boardroom and here. I think we like this equipment. It works actually very well. We'll mount this stuff in here if we do it in the boardroom. The boardroom doesn't have audio unless we take this entire system and throw it in there. And the projector is on its last leg. So that was the reason we were proposing it in here. It is baked into the budget already. So it is something that we would have to when we go through the budget presentation, we'll have to take it out of the budget at some point.
If we
It is in the 2021 budget. So if you approve it here, we will have to take that out of the budget. Does that make sense?
Yes. So are there thoughts on this?
I think that's what we're hearing from members, that the audio or the visual isn't as clear as they would like it to be. I don't see COVID going away by this meeting.
I think at the members meeting or the concerned members meeting we had, Suzanne and I had a discussion after the meeting that, you know, there has been a suggestion about verbatim minutes. And Suzanne suggested after the meeting that if we can get to this, that issue could very well go away because of the clarity we're able to provide with this. And I think it's, again, transparency. It's in touch with we have nothing to hide. Let's make it available and make it as best we can to everybody. And I don't think COVID's going away anytime soon either. So.
And Brian, we spoke briefly and just like IRS conferences, it's not verbatim. You're not repeating every single word that's said during the whole, but it is a time frame involved. You know, when they make a motion from 6:40 to 6:50, so that when you're on the video, if someone is watching it back, kind of the minutes reflect kind of what we used to do the agenda. Is kind of like that, because I don't think a verbatim word for word is necessarily.
I don't think it's practical.
This would take place of that.
My question was, we were going to TV instead of upgrading the projector.
TV is just a heck of a lot clearer. Heck of a lot clearer. When we upgraded all of our projectors, number one, you don't have to worry about the bulb. These bulbs only last so long. And then number two, the clarity is just, it's phenomenal on these bigger screen TVs. That's why this room, probably a little too big for an 85-inch screen TV. I don't think you would do that in here. But for the boardroom, we actually tested it. So Sam moved the screen down to what the size would be of that TV size. And you really didn't lose much. And basically his point was what you gain in clarity, you lose in size. So that's why. For some reasons it worked, or some rooms it works, Brian, some rooms it doesn't. This room probably wouldn't be one.
Yeah. Expense or capital?
Expense.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I can tell you I'm really struggling with the audio tonight.
Couldn't hear what you said.
What's that?
So what did Jason just?
He's struggling with the audio.
Kind of ironic. He's struggling with the audio.
But none of this really has anything to do with that.
Well, I think some of that is just fine tuning this. So
Would the receiver be able to come after?
we're moving this back and forth. So none of this is like ideal. Like what we would probably do is put this, like just as an example, this microphone set would probably go into the boardroom, and then we would get hanging mics in here. That's just one example. It's not permanently mounted, so it's hard to us trying to get all of us, 10 of us into that one. I mean, I mess around with this for like an hour today trying to get all of our seats in this camera. So there's some fine tuning, I would say.
We're spread out right now too because of COVID.
Yeah.
So the microphones are kind of stretching to get to everybody. So we're not going to be so spread out. You'll be closer to microphones.
Is this equipment only for the boardroom?
Correct.
So it won't be, any of it will be transported back to here as needed?
Correct. I mean, I guess we could. If we needed more microphones, you could, yeah. We need to probably think through that. I think.
What if we do away with the conference room and just use this room?
That's what I'm thinking. Yeah.
Well, the only
Why do you need a conference room when we're doing it? Use this room.
the only reason is because sometimes there's more than one conference going on. There's actually quite a few times that actually happens because
So then that could be the overflow and this in the main one?
that could be. This gets used by the community actually more than what I ever would have imagined. It isn't now because we've closed it, but it actually does get used.
During the COVID crisis, use it now and here, and then as time goes allowed and we go back to the boardroom, transport it back there?
And the other thing was like, so Dale, you came in last week, right? for training. So all this equipment was in here. Well, it wouldn't be that practical for Dale to sit here, I guess, at that point in time. So they moved it all back into the boardroom for him. It's a little bit easier to navigate, and the screen's easier to see in clarity. So again, I mean, we could make this work, I'm sure. It's time to upgrade the boardroom, and we thought this would be a good time to do it.
So I'm going to ask on updating just for now, just the TV, doing the TV. What is people's thought on that?
That's the part I'm struggling with. The sound, I have no issue with whatsoever.
So you're struggling with putting a TV in there?
Yeah, if we're going to be meeting in here.
Okay.
Cool.
We could always piecemeal it too. I mean, there's nothing that says you can't get the rest.
Other thoughts on that? Mine is, yeah, I can see a TV, but also is it worth relying on an old projector in there to maintain it? Even if we're meeting in here, that's still getting used for other things. Well, maybe I shouldn't say this. I'd assume there's some staff meetings back there.
Yeah, we have meetings all day long in the boardroom.
So to me, the TV isn't just for us. This is for the staff, for their board meeting, for their meetings. They can do presentations on that. And right now, it's just for us. I would tend to agree, but when we think about it for the staff, then I see the purpose of upgrading that room, the visual in that room, and keeping it current.
There's actually right now, the Heats is in the way Heats group. It's it's Fusion Energy's apprentice program, because we're centrally located pretty well. So typically they use this room since we're in here.
I know, like I was going back to Brian's, the Epson projectors, I just looked up, they're between 500 and 900. They are very, very clear. We have one right now. So that's what the difference was. I was wondering between that and the TV.
It really is just clarity, honestly. Clarity, and there's not as much maintenance. They last longer. I don't know, either way.
So if we do that, is there a plan to do something in here, or would we move it back and forth? I mean, if we voted yes on this and said, let's do the boardroom.
If you vote yes to this, what we're going to do is to fix them out as much as we can. If that answers your question. I mean, right now, this thing is just, we got it on a moving cart. I mean, ideally, he's going to mount that camera somewhere on a stand. It won't be movable if we get this.
Do we have smaller groups Brett, you were mentioning about the other groups. I mean, do they always use this room, or you said we have somebody back there right now?
Typically, they would have been up here, but since we were having this meeting,
Would have been back there.
I don't see a camera on this.
so up at the top,
Oh,
it's a logistic camera and the microphones at 2,000 or below.
okay.
Again, we can piecemeal this too. I mean, it's not that, if we want to wait until the projector goes bad and then get the TV too, I mean.
This audio is ours.
Yes.
Okay.
Jason, do you have any opinion on the screen and audio for the boardroom?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
We need to do something about the audio. If members are trying to listen to this like I am tonight, I'm struggling bad.
But this audio will go back there, is that right?
No, this audio will stay in here.
That's not working. So that's the issue, I guess.
Yeah. Is the new system going to be better than this system? If this isn't working,
To me, the question is, can we get a better audio system that will, to fix in here? That might work better and move this back there. Is that kind of what I'm hearing?
Right.
Yes.
Let's do that. Let's do it in steps.
So,
Yeah.
so we're looking at approving the money for better audio
Here.
in here.
Move this audio back there because that's one of the main problems back there right now is we don't have audio video back there.
Jason, is everybody's audio bad, or I'm sitting right next to a microphone? Can you hear me very clearly, or is it like Michael and Brett that you're having a hard time?
You started out really good, but then you started cutting out. There's a lot of echo. The best speaker tonight so far has been Eric.
Crystal's getting fine, so that might
Might be Jason's end.
We can listen to this afterwards. I did some testing today, and honestly, I sat in every single seat, and it sounded great. So I don't know.
Okay.
But I get your point. If we need a better audio solution, just move this back in the back. The main thing is we don't have audio and video opportunity right now in the back, and we got a projector that's going to be going out. That's really the main point.
Mm-hmm.
And
I get your point.
Jason sounds bad to us, so
Yeah.
that's probably just a connection issue with him, maybe.
Thanks, Brian. I heard that.
Oh, you hear.
So we just need to talk bad about him and he'll hear it then.
Crystal texted me and said she can hear fine. So.
So what I'm kind of hearing is that we'd be okay with a motion to supply better audio for this room, moving this audio back to the conference room.
Unless this audio is fine. It's just Jason that has it.
Why don't you just approve the audio and video solution and we'll figure out what needs to be in what room, and then we'll wait on the TV until the projector goes out.
I'll make that motion if needed.
So this is audio and video for the back room?
This room. Whatever makes this room best.
Correct.
We're using it for now.
Approve this.
Yeah.
Don't worry about the rooms. We'll figure it out.
Okay, but you're approving audio, you're making the motion for audio and video for a room.
Video, we're talking that camera, correct?
Correct.
Yes.
Another camera like that.
Yes.
Okay.
$2,000 is what we're estimating it to be.
So.
Do that, yes.
Jeff made a motion. Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second.
Motion.
No. The motion is for audio and
The Logic Tech camera for this,
Logitech camera and microphones.
correct,
Mm-hmm.
approximately $2,000.
I'll second it.
Is there further discussion on that part?
No.
Okay, then we'll vote. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. So audio and video. For now, then.
Yep.
Okay. And we're just going to hold off on the TV then and, so,
Yeah.
good with that. Okay, the next one is the Brewersville mowing.
You guys already
We approved that at the previous meeting. I thought so. I just needed to.
It was just already on the agenda, so I left it.
That's what I was thinking. So. Okay.
The one question I have, can we make sure we're billed by year end?
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
that it better be, yes.
yeah.
But you would accrue it anyway, wouldn't you, Eric, if we didn't have an invoice or not?
Yes. So that would expense it this year.
Looking at the risk management.
Yeah, so this is my quarterly risk management report out, which is 2020 Q3. My team and I met on October 28th to go over the risk management plan. One thing I wanted to note on this is we all went through some training, and they presented a risk management file that our team really liked. So we converted to this new format. And really what this new format does is it goes, from our old one was just a high, medium, low risk assessment. This one goes through 1 through 5. So it's a little bit more detailed scale ranking. It gives definitions for each one of those 1 through 5. it evaluates the residual risk after implementing the mitigation, which I think is important because if we say we're going to go do something because of a risk, okay, well, what does going and doing something do to the risk? So I thought that was kind of important, and so we've got that in our form now too. And then to evaluate the risk tolerance. So we can all say, you know, unfortunately, there's a lot of risk in every business and you can't completely mitigate it away. So what is the company's stance? And this is where, you know, eventually when we start getting into these that, you know, love to hear feedback from you all as far as, you know, well, that doesn't, you know, I hear you, but that seems like that might not be the right risk tolerance as far as what we'd be willing to get into and step into. And again, we just started using this, this format. So as you can see, we basically took 1, 2, 3, 4 of the risks that are on our current document, and we moved them to what we're going to call an annual review. And these are things like rates, succession planning, contractor backups. These are things that we probably don't think about every year, but we really don't even think about every quarter. That's kind of the point of it. We did mitigate and close because we finished the sealed parking lot project. So we closed that risk, and then we added 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I wanted to walk through those real quick and answer any questions if you have any. The first one was the parking lot. So we actually had a member fall at one point in time. And so there's really 2 things here. Number one, our public access parking is across really our main drive to get in. You know, so there's cars coming in and out of our gate pretty much all day long. You know, when FedEx and all them are coming in, and then our guys are coming in and out. Those folks have to walk across that, number one. And there's kids that get out of cars. We've seen it quite a few times, and you know, we're always telling people to slow down. The other thing is our handicap is across there too. So you got to come across traffic and all the way across the front side of the building in order to get into our front gate or our front lobby entrance. So we documented that as a risk, and it's you know, something that we're going to kind of keep an eye on. The AMI infrastructure, you're going to, this is tied to something that's in the budget that you'll see this year. Really what this has to do with is the fact that our meters were installed in 2007 and they're getting on their life cycle. So we're starting to see an increase in failure rate, and therefore it's a risk of when we get into eventually, you're going to start seeing large numbers of these things failing. And so there's going to be some CapEx there that we got to plan for. So again, we document that as risk. Members' names not on membership. This is something that we kind of identified. It's come up a few times where there's really 2 things here. Number one, someone's name is not on the membership at all. Whether it's a business or it's a spouse or whatever, you know, giving that person information from the co-op could get you into legal trouble because they're not really officially in the member list. Again, I don't think we've ever had this, and I'm not saying that it's this huge risk, but it is something that we've called out. And then the other one is you know, capital credits. Again, you know, just as for an instance, if you have a wife and husband that get a divorce and possibly the husband wasn't on the membership list, and then so the capital credits go to, it just sets us up for some legal liabilities that we really want to look into and understand. So we have that one. And then last, you know, we heard this from the safety committee. There's been times where our guys show up to an accident scene and we know there was reports of wires on top of the car. The wires are no longer there. There was reports of wires in the road. The wires aren't on the road anymore. And so there is some there's some liability in our hands since, you know, we are the entity that owns those assets. And so we believe there's a good mitigation to do some community training. And so that was another one that we feel like is something that we can impact the community around education. And so we added that. You'll see something in the budget on that one. So as a summary, we believe, you know, management believes we have mitigations in place to operate at an acceptable risk level. We've identified some projects that will need to be discussed in our budget review and potentially become 2021 projects. We believe with the new format, we have even more oversight to our company risk. So that is my report out. The one that so there are questions?
Any other questions? Okay.
I would suggest too, if a board member sees something, hears something, if you identify something, we're all here. So just give me a call, let me know. I'll bring it. We meet, like I said, the managers meet quarterly. And so if you think of a risk or something that we probably ought to be thinking about, don't hesitate. Let me know. That's the point of it. Yeah, I hear you.
Okay, so scenario that happened last week, farmer is shelling his corn, catches the fiber line, pulls down 2 poles, they fall on the road. Another farmer comes along with his semi, hits said pole. What happens? Who's responsible?
Yeah, are you talking about that as a specific risk that we need to be talking about, or?
Well, that is exactly what happened, but just use it as a what if scenario. Because that's the question that was posed to me.
Yeah, no, that's a great question, and actually we're doing an investigation on that right now. We haven't got all the ducks together to send over to legal yet, but that's where I'm going to be heading with it, because that is a very intricate situation. There's a lot of moving parts. What I will tell you, as it relates to risk assessment, is we did identify a risk early on this year. I mean, this was one of the reasons that we were off track on construction work plan projects, is because we pulled, and I remember we had the conversation here as a board, or you all did, basically around the fact that we have some communication lines that seem to be pretty low. And so one thing that we did is we pulled Chris for 2 months, and he identified a process by which we go through. So when we get a call from someone that wants to hang fiber on our poles, that we actually go through this process and identify make-ready poles based upon height requirements and stuff like that. So I think moving forward, we've already actually rejected like 5 or 6 projects based upon this new process. So I think we have a good mitigation in place. Now, I think what your question is, and where we're working on an investigation is okay, well, what do you do with the 1,200 miles of line that, okay, let's just say 800 miles of line that are already hung with communications? Do they meet code? Do they not meet code? And all these other questions. We're working on that, and I will report back once we get to the point where we have our ducks in a row. Jason?
The problem I see is no one's maintaining those lines.
Yeah.
Is that our responsibility or the person that has the communication cable?
It's theirs. It's
Then
clearly in.
How do we enforce it? Because that's our biggest issue. It's not the height of the pole. It's the take-up wire that's in there is being stretched, and then no one's going through and inspecting it. And we've talked about this for 2 years. But anyhow, it's their responsibility. Is it our job to tell them that? Because that's the issue more than having taller poles.
Yeah. Yep. No, that's a part of this investigation we're going through. But I can tell you that some of that is covered in the contract.
Well, then how do we enforce it? Because
as I said, that's with legal right now, so we've got to let legal answer that.
And I'm good with that. I just don't want to lose it. So can we have a follow-up on it next month?
Yeah.
On specifically maintaining the communication lines that are on our poles, that are not our responsibility or our liability. That makes sense, Neil.
Just because they're attached to our.
I agree. What is the height? Do they measure from the road?
It depends on the situation.
I know, because I got the same situation. The road is flat and then we got our field goes up 3 or 4, 6 feet.
It depends on the situation.
I know.
But that's all in your NEC code.
It is. And some of it is back in the day, just to give you some of the complexities, not that long ago, that changed. and it changed pretty major, like feet. So anything that was designed and put in place to the old code is fine, but anything newer, it's different. There's just a lot of complexities to it. That is part of the investigation though, Jeff. And so, yeah, I'll take an action item. I don't know that I'll have anything to report back next month other than,
Understand?
we're working on it. It's something that obviously is in our legal bucket at this point.
Okay. Next item is, I just bringing before the board was, we've got a request, Jeff put in a request for the 2015 through 2017 Form 7s.
I was the board representative on the strategic planning committee for the CFC. And I did quite a bit of studying going into that, where I reviewed the CATRA data and I reviewed the Form 7. And there is just a ton of information on the Form 7. And it's much simpler to see and understand, and it makes you realize where our money's invested. So what I'm wanting to do is get those years that match the CATRA data and look at history. That's why I've asked for it.
And what are you planning? My question is what's besides just looking at data, what are you looking for?
Well, my thought was I was on these committees so I could be part of the training when we actually have a group session. Because isn't that what we're planning these meetings for, is the 2021 strategic plan? So we're going in, Brian and I attended the Hoosier. I did the CFC, I'm doing the NRECA. But it's to educate all of us, because there's a lot of information I've learned just by studying for that day.
Can those be put on the dashboard like the other? I know we have the 19 and the prior 990s. Is it as simple as just putting that on the dashboard?
It's not a task at all. I'm creative.
Just scan them and put on the dashboard so we all have them?
That's what I'm asking. I'm trying to get what the purpose is for them. So I'm okay with that. Does anybody else have any thoughts on that? So I am okay with that. The next one was a request from Jeff again for prepayment for all loans. Prepayment penalties for all.
Oh, yeah. Well, it wasn't for all loans. It was actually CFC. When we were,
Okay. Go ahead.
we were on the training course with CFC, or I took it to be a training course. And again, I thought I was being, and maybe Eric, you can explain, but I thought I was there to represent the board and ask questions. And what my investigation is, or looking into it, within the CFC loans, we have 3 different types of loans, is what I believe we have.
CFC?
Yes. There's fixed, there's a variable fixed, and then there's balloons. And that's where
We don't have any balloons, but we do have the other 2.
I thought there was anyhow, I'll get back with you guys, you and Eric, to get clarification on the balloon, because I thought we did have 4 balloons, maybe 5. But that was where I was asking, what is the prepayment penalties on those? And specifically looking at the 3 that have the higher interest rates, is it cost justifying right now while interest rates are low? Not to refinance all of them, but to refinance the ones that are the heavy hitters, and to have that actual information to talk in the strategic planning.
My one comment to that would be, this would be the 3rd time in 2 years we've looked at this, and since I've been on the board. And if with low interest rates, what they're doing to us is they raise their prepayment penalty to make it not worthwhile. So I'm asking, why are we needing to look at this for a 3rd time?
That isn't the information I received. And maybe I misunderstood, but the prepayment penalty is fixed. It doesn't increase.
No. These are make-whole prepayment penalties.
These are what?
These are make-whole prepayment penalties.
But there's 4 of the loans that have refinancial dates. And I thought on those 4 loans,
Those are variable.
well, they're not variable based on what they told us a variable was, because they said a variable to refinance is just $3,300. So that's why I didn't think it was a variable.
It's variable. They call it a variable, but it's basically a repricing.
Yeah, but it's not what they considered a variable I didn't think. That's where I specifically asked the questions.
You can get more information. I asked Brian Stavich, who's like our main contact with CFC, before they told me to hold off for right now. And he basically told me that as of right now, the debt you have with us, there's not a lot of financial gain for you to refinance those, because I said, well, is it similar? Are we sitting in a similar position to as we are with FFB, which basically has prepayment penalties that make them whole. So you really can't get ahead by doing those. His comment to me was, as at this point in time, CFC loans that you have with us are built relatively similar to how the FFB is, which will make CFC whole to refinance. What would be refinancing? Be paying those off essentially. But I didn't go any further. That was a quick conversation, honestly.
And then there was probably 2 or 3 others. A couple of them were in the action items, but to actually compare CFC
And that one is,
CoBank, because there might be an opportunity to take all of this from CFC, which is our US requirements, refinance it for 30 years through CoBank and be money ahead.
I understand that, and I believe that is, we're hoping for December to have that
Pros, cons list.
the pros, cons list.
That's why all of that was tying together through the financial part of the strategic planning.
That one didn't make it. I should have got back with you. That one is, they're trying to work on that one, and hopefully that one is on the agenda for December.
128.
And I was making, you know,
January is when it's on the schedule for, so we won't get to that till.
but I wasn't looking at all loans. I was just looking at the CFC, which falls under our US
We
requirements.
have those back at the beginning of the year when we did all these prepayment loans. We got all the prepayment loans. And we can ask for them again.
And they actually said in the training that they could easily get it to us.
I understand that, but it's
To make whole.
it's a make whole, and this will be the third time in 2 years. I just don't get the point in asking the same question for a third time, and the first 2 answers was, it doesn't make sense to do.
No matter what the interest, if the interest rate goes to 0, our prepayment penalty goes up. It's a make whole. What they basically do, and what I heard is that these are government-backed loans that they're going and brokering out for. So they have to cover those costs and those risks. And so that's how they get us low interest rates is through these prepayments. Again, we can go ask for them again, but I mean, we've done this a couple of times and they change daily.
I don't know what other people's opinions are, but that's my opinion is I don't see a point in asking for this for a third time in 2 years.
How much work is it they're asking on their end? I mean, is it just a matter of their amortization schedules that they print off and send us?
I got the impression it was no big deal. He was
I mean,
going
if it's gonna be done, I mean, if it's amortization schedule, to get it yearly would be beneficial.
I'm not worried about their time. I'm worried about why are we wasting our office staff's time doing this a third time?
So if we get the amortization schedules and we get all this, we will be putting together the story as far as does it make sense or not. I mean, we've done it 3 times. So we will end up putting together the whole loan package and again, it doesn't take time to get the information. The time we're going to have to invest in putting all that together is substantial.
So that's my question is why are we asking this third time in just over 2 years? Does anybody else have thoughts on that?
Well, it doesn't sound like the answer is going to change. I mean, we're making it whole, and I think Eric kind of alluded to that when he talked to.
That was a great conversation with him. I mean, I haven't really personally dug into it because I guess we had done it a while back. So I can't speak in depth detail about each of our loans at this point in time.
So Eric, when we had the surplus that we were discussing in October, the 3 loans that you noted there, were those just the most beneficial for us to pay those off first? Is that why they were noted?
Those are the only 3 we have that don't have prepayment penalties. Those are directly with RUS, Rural Utility Service. So the only 3 we have directly with them, no prepayment penalties. The money that we have with FFB that's backed by RUS, sometimes you'll almost hear those used interchangeably because it's backed by RUS, but they're really with the Federal Financing Bank. That's where the bulk of the most of our debt is. And then there's the CFC, which is about $5 million that we have with them right now. But those three were the only three that do not have that prepayment penalty. Plus, they were some of our high, they were 5+% interest rate, which was, and we do have some higher than that, I think, individually, but they wouldn't maybe make sense because of the prepayment penalties that come with it.
I mean, I know time, but I mean, anything we can work on to reduce that outstanding debt, I think should be done, whether it's just Eric referring to us what should be paid off and what shouldn't, or just requesting an email of what doesn't have a prepayment penalty. I think work should be done on reducing debt, but.
They won't argue that point, but at the same time, we either have to get our money through debt or through our members. So we're either borrowing from a bank or borrowing from our members. We have to remember that.
I think our members would want us to look into it anyway. And I have a hard time thinking what you just said, that they're going to up your penalty if you get lower interest. I have never heard that. And I've had in the last month in my operation reduced 2 or 3 loans by 2 to 2.5%.
Here's the way I would suggest, let's, guys, these loans are nothing like what you'd be dealing.
I know, but it's still.
And I hear what you're saying, but we're putting assets in the ground that are 30 years. There's, we have an equity number that we're trying to hit. This all goes back to the equity management, and we got to do some training on that. We got to get some understanding around what that all means and how that ties in. I hear what you say, and but back when some of these higher interest rate loans were taken, they were taken because we're trying to spread the cost over the members that are using the assets, right? So we have a 30-year asset, right? With typically a member on our lines are around 18 years. 30 years, you want that one member to pay for all that? You're asking for the current members to
I'm just asking, I'm not sure that they charge you more a penalty because you're going to get a lower rate. I just don't see that.
But they're a make whole loan. So, and 2 times we've gone through this, and 2 times it's been the same thing. 3rd time is not going to change that answer.
let's bring them in and go through it all.
Okay. Are you okay with that, Dale?
Yeah, I'm fine. I mean, I'm going to defer to Eric, and I have the same understanding that the lending institution is going to make sure, call it make whole, call it whatever. They've got a certain amount of money out there that they put out for return on investment. And the only way they're going to get it is how much we pay them back, and opinion that they're going to get it one way or the other. It's not a typical mortgage like me going to refinance my house. It's a totally different
So
concept.
these bonds that they're putting out there for these are like $5 million. They can't put anything less than $5 million bonds to insure these loans for folks like us. So that's why we get better interest rates. I mean, we can get 1.2 right.
So right now, what I am going to suggest is, using Brett's suggestion, we bring in someone to talk about this. We don't ask our staff to, at this point, until after we hear from someone.
I wasn't planning on asking the staff. I was just wanting to see what the prepayment penalties were. They said it was easy to get.
They're in the iPads.
The most recent ones are we've asked for, but those are going to be wrong. They're going to be using based on interest rates.
Hey, but you can look at the interest rate at that point in time and compare it to what it is.
That's right. If you go back and use the interest rates at that point in time, they're going to raise those prepayment penalties.
But are you referring to the long-term debt details?
Yeah.
Because mine is dated 12/31/2018. Where else would I find the newer one?
I'll have to go back and research. I know we've done.
That's the one that's on the iPad now.
It may have been an email or something, but I know I've got one out there.
It doesn't list the prepayment penalties either. On the
I
iPhone.
find it. I need some time to look for it.
Understand.
No, and I'm good with that, but all I wanted was put it on the, that's all I wanted. So.
Any other questions? Those? Okay. We'll move on to discussion of the members meeting.
You want me to start?
Go for it.
I'll start. Guess it was 2 weeks ago tomorrow, I believe, that we had a members meeting. Most of the board was there. All in all, I thought it went well. I talked to Kenny Peters via phone last night, and I don't know if Kenny's on the call or not, but from my perspective, and this is purely my perspective, we did not have an agenda. I think the fact that there's conversations going on between the concerned members and the board is a good thing. We did not have an agenda, but what I shared with Kenny last night on the phone, after thanking him for arranging it, because I thought, they put some time and effort into arranging it. Jay Hatton served as the, I won't say moderator, but as the MC. They were complimentary of our attendance and complimentary of our willingness to meet with them. But what I shared with Kenny was the fact that we got there and there was a list of questions that I know I was not aware of. And the questions started coming, and I shared with Kenny, I said, really from my perspective is if you wanted answers to those questions, the prudent thing would have been to share that, at least the topics of information with those people that you were asking the questions of. Because I, for one, wanted to answer some of the questions with what I thought was the answer. But there's no way in the world I was going to, in that forum, suggest what I thought was the answer without having the ability to look at any kind of previous information. So in that respect, I felt like we didn't gain a lot of ground. But again, that being said, we were meeting and we were talking. But in that vein, a couple of things that came up, we talked about one of them tonight we've already talked about one of them tonight, was the minutes being verbatim. And Gordon Smiley was kind of the driver behind that. And while I think that's impractical, Suzanne and I talked after the meeting, and I thought we'd kind of agreed that with given, I don't want to say optimal, but given good audio visual information, that's an issue that could be addressed and that issue can go away. And I think we made a step earlier tonight. The second issue that I walked away from or walked away with and probably caused me more concern than any is the fact that there is a premise out there that as directors, we are prohibited from talking to members. And that was very clearly pointed out that night. And I wanted to respond. And again, I didn't have all the background, so I didn't respond. The next day, I sent Suzanne a text because she was the one that, I don't know if you volunteered it, but at least shared that position. And I sent her a text and asked her what was the origin of that or what's the basis for that perspective. And she responded via email very promptly and referenced policy 2.7, I believe, which is the access.
You have to pull that up on board, Brett.
Yeah. Which is members' access to board meetings. And she further referenced her two policy violations, which I don't know if those violations, Suzanne, your perspective is that because you talk to members, you've been written up twice?
One policy violation, the other one was an email stating that I shouldn't have been talking to him regarding a line extension. I was kind of the in-between communicator. And I was sent an email saying that I should not be discussing that with a member. So one policy violation.
Okay, so
an email telling me I should not be speaking to that member.
So even one, I guess I'm unclear, and I was looking for clarity, and this is what Kenny and I were talking about. I'm looking for clarity on how the message came about that said, as a director, none of us can talk to a member. I don't know the specifics, but as I read policy 2.7, it's certainly, the way I read it, does not prohibit any of us from talking to members. Now, that is access to a board meeting, but that's totally different than talking to a member. I mean, half of my family is members, so if I can't talk to them about REMC without being in violation, then it's probably a good thing we're not having Thanksgiving.
Regarding REMC issues, not talking to members, but regarding specific line extensions and or basically agreeing that I had the same issue happen before. That's basically what my one email and one policy violation was written up for.
Okay, but again, I don't want to sound, but I need clarity. talking to a member, I do not see as a problem. Whether you talk, if you're going to carry the flag for that member, then I see that as a totally different issue than talking to a member.
Mine was sending it back to Brett and Michael wanting to get what the member was asking for that he didn't receive. I spoke with the member. He told me what he wanted. I said, I don't even know what you're talking about. I don't understand that. I don't have the knowledge of that. I emailed Brett and Michael immediately saying this is what the member wants. I received an email saying that I am not allowed to speak to members regarding line extensions. I don't know anything about line extensions other than the basics of it. That's why I forwarded to them.
Had the member availed themselves to Rule 16 at that point in time?
This was prior to that he came to a meeting, and then it was the next week just to complain. And then the other one was fiduciary responsibility. Basically, I agreed with a member that I had the same issue.
Because that very issue that night was very, I don't want to see, it wasn't hostile at all, but it was a very tense issue. Because I'm sitting there shaking my head and saying, how can I as a director, how can anybody in this room as a director not be allowed to talk to a member?
And when that member approached me again, I basically said, I'm not allowed to communicate with you on that subject. I received an email. You need to talk to Brett.
I may speak up here because this is an email I sent and I sent it to everyone. In the email, I did not say you could not talk to them. Okay. And my interpretation, and based on the second email that you said, is you wanted the information to give to them, so you could give it to them. And my understanding, this was a I'm going to say it wrong. This was not a board issue at that point. So I was directing you to make sure they got the information through the experts who are the people in this office and not through the board members, so that we don't put ourselves in a position where we tell a member information and get yourself or the REMC in trouble because we don't have the knowledge.
The member wanted a detailed bill, and I told him to forward it to them because I had no idea how to get him a detailed bill. When the member approached me again, I told him, I received an email. You need to go directly to them. I was instructed that I wasn't supposed to discuss line extensions with you. So that's where a lot of that maybe would have stemmed from, which that's what's happened that back then.
Well, because clearly that night at the meeting, it was evident that a large portion of the concerned members group are operating under the premise that we as directors cannot talk to members. I mean, that was a premise in my mind. That's the way I walked away from it, because I was shaking my head and thinking that is so atypical from what any company, but especially a co-op, operates under. I don't know where the disconnect is, but if we are prohibited from talking to members, then this isn't anything that I've in fact.
So when a member has a complaint, they can approach us.
It can approach us, and then we direct them to the proper place.
And let me.
Which is what I did. It's exactly what I did. I said, I have no idea. Ask them for a detailed bill. That's exactly the steps I took, Michael. I copied both Brett and you on the email. I was hiding nothing. And you returned and said, please do not discuss line extensions with members. And that's where a lot of that stemmed from, because I told the member, I'm not allowed to speak with you anymore. You need to go straight to them. I received an email saying I cannot speak with you anymore.
And like I said, and that's a specific issue. If you want to discuss that, he was discussing a line extension in detail, and that's the email back said, asked so I can give him the information. It's not our job to give members detailed information about their line extensions. And that's what the issue is. When it comes to a line extension, as I said, we have a policy, so we need to let the team here answer those questions. We don't have the expertise to answer. And us just giving them information can put us in a bad spot because we can't answer those questions.
And I'm going to correct that. That afternoon is when I emailed both of you and said, he's requesting for a detailed bill. Please provide it to this member. I don't ever say I know anything about line extensions other than the basis. When the member approached me to see if I received anything back and I had his email with there, I said no, and I was instructed by email, you need to contact them directly. I'm not allowed to discuss requesting a detailed bill for you. And that's where I think a lot of that stemmed, because I told the member that he had to go through them, that he shouldn't be emailing me.
And actually on that one, I think I started it with an email prior to that to make the whole board aware. I think that email I sent had 3 different issues on it. Maybe it was 2. I don't remember. But I've also told him that I couldn't talk to him.
His invoice said REMC contribution with a lump sum. He asked me for a detailed bill. That's what I requested with Brett and Michael. When he approached me again, I said, I'm not allowed to. And I think that's where a lot of that stemmed. I just told him that he needed to contact them, that I wasn't allowed to request that on his behalf.
I would ask, I heard that it was stated that there was a vote, a 5-3 vote that said you couldn't talk. What vote was that?
That was the vote for them to attend the board meeting to avail their issues and concerns to the board.
Okay, so that wasn't about, that vote was not about.
No, but I think the original discussion about are we not allowed to come to board members came from when I told that member, and it was communicated that I cannot speak to him about that anymore. He has to go through because I received an email stating I cannot speak to him.
Well, I guess, maybe we're playing semantics here. I don't know, but to speak to a member about any issue they have regarding REMC is one thing. To then pick up that crusade or that and to come to this office and do something on their behalf, if it's in addition to them being here, if I come with them and they need to talk to Chris or Crystal or Pat or whatever the case is, that to me is one thing. But to take that baton from them and do it on their behalf is not talking to the member in my mind.
It was not on the behalf. I requested them to send the member the detailed bill.
You requested it to be sent to you.
On his, correct, because he hadn't gotten it. And then when he asked me again, I said, I'm not allowed to. I got an email saying I cannot request that for you. You'll have to request it again. I don't know if the member ever got the detailed bill or not. I just dropped it from there. So I think that's where a lot of that stemmed from, that conversation. And then there was another situation that I agreed with the member. I had the same situation happen to me. And that's where the policy violation was.
And that has to do with our fiduciary responsibility of loyalty to the REMC.
But I will gladly send out a correction. If an REMC member can approach us about an issue they have with the REMC, I will gladly send a letter to the concerned members and say, obviously there was a miscommunication with the first one that I was told I couldn't discuss. The second was a fiduciary. I was misunderstanding that I'm not allowed to speak to members. Bring your concerns to me in your district. If that's what we're allowed to do, I will write that letter to the concerned citizens and have Kenny distribute it tomorrow.
Well,
That's what you're saying.
That's what
well, and hopefully
That will clear up that problem, because my goal is to check off this list.
and as is mine. And that therein lies the biggest issue that I walked away from, because that being said is my question is, how do you remedy that? Because that issue, there was a comment made that I took offense to, and it was reference to a 5-3 vote. And I won't go into the details of that. And I will take issue with that reference if it's ever made again, regardless of who makes it.
I will gladly, if the members can approach us regarding issues and without us getting an email and or a violation and or a verbal warning, however you want to phrase it, I will gladly, because I want to check off the box. I don't want to create more.
But let me, for my own sake, clarify, Suzanne, they can approach you and you can even, and correct me if I'm wrong, this is my perception. You or I can even be involved, but I can't be leading that charge. If a member approaches me and they have an issue and I say, you need to talk to Crystal or you need to talk to Pat, you know what? I'll come with you. But they make the coordination, they do the contact, they do all of that, and I'm there as a witness, for lack of a better term. That to me is fine. That's my perspective. And tell me if I'm wrong or I'm not.
Every single employee that's had an issue or member prior to that, I've emailed Brett and Crystal or Brett and someone else and saying, here's the member, please let them know. I don't need to know the details of the bills. I don't understand how their usage has been calculated. And I've sent that to Crystal to have her take care of that but those other 2 samples are the ones that I told them that need to contact them directly. I can't speak with you about that.
And had they contacted them or have they contacted them?
Well, no, I stayed out of it.
And it's their responsibility, not yours, not mine as a director to do that.
Right, but I do think that stemmed from that email and the policy violation.
And I agree. And I think it's caused a great deal of unrest. So if we have clarity and we can talk to a director, or excuse me, a member, as directors, we can talk. provided we're not carrying that torch or baton or crusade or whatever, then I would certainly appreciate and quite honestly expect some sort of rescinding of that perspective, because it was a hot topic that night. It was probably the single biggest issue that irritated me that night, because that is not what I signed up for.
Has anyone else received a violation or an email or verbal discussing things with members?
I did.
But again, discussing is not the issue
Okay. I will,
that I see. You can discuss.
okay, well, for the email and the violation I received, I took that as miscommunication. And I didn't want to discuss anything else with members because I didn't want another email or a verbal or a policy violation or build up anything against me. So I will gladly let Kenny and those members know that you can bring your issues to us. We will delegate and tell you who you need to speak with.
And again, as a director, should we want to be involved as a, not as party to it, but just to make sure we're getting the answers? I see no issue with that. Does anyone else? But I cannot drive the issue. I cannot take that responsibility from the member who has the concern. I can't be a party to it. I can be a witness. Because that issue bothered me tremendously that night.
Any other comments on that issue?
Just to close out, so we are clear?
Yep.
Suzanne, would you be so kind as to somehow formally rescind that? And I'd like to have,
I will copy it to you.
I would like to have a copy of that. And I talked to Kenny last night by phone. I didn't talk about this issue, but I told him I fully expected that there would be some clarity provided tonight referring to that very issue. So
A lot of it did stem with a member that would come to me and I would say, you need to contact them directly because I don't want to receive an email or a violation. So that's where a lot of that stemmed from.
and again, I think that lends itself to the fiduciary responsibility that we cannot subrogate our allegiance or our loyalty to a member over the REMC. We are loyal to the REMC. We can help, we can be involved, but we cannot pass out our allegiance and say, I'll do it for you.
I think it was me telling them, you need to contact them directly because I don't want to see an email or a verbal or a policy violation.
So
And that's what I've told the members since then, because I didn't know if I was going to get another email or a policy violation. I told them to come directly to the REMC.
with that being said, and if you would be so kind as to do that, I would appreciate it.
Sure.
And I think what caught me off guard though, that evening, all I kept hearing is we just can't talk to members. And maybe I missed the first part of the discussion. I don't know if they're all aware of.
I think it was because the member who approached me and I said, you need to go to the RMC. I can't speak.
That continually was iterated, like you just can't talk to members. And it's like, we've got to have that open dialogue regardless, right? But. Okay.
Thank you in advance.
You are welcome. My goal is to bridge and check off the list. Also not to receive policy violations and or emails that could impact me future and or think people that I'm doing something against policy here.
Do you have anything else on the meeting?
No, other than I spoke with Kenny Peters last night by phone, and I thought the fact that there's dialogue, a two-way communication is good. The worst thing we can do, and excuse my analogy, the worst thing we can do is take our ball and go home and him take his ball and go home and pout. That's my perspective. So I think checking off my mentality, I think two issues pretty much, we've said, you know what, we're pretty dang close to hearing what members had and saying, you know what, we're pretty close.
I'm with you there.
So thank you for that. I'm sorry.
So for my clarification, if I want to talk to a member comes, wants to talk to me and they have a problem, my responsibility is to direct them in the right direction to get their problem solved. Basically it.
Correct.
Yes.
And you can hold their hand through that process, but they have to be the one driving the issue.
Right.
And that's why we do Rule 16. It says, it goes through this process. If they don't like it, then it steps. policy 27 that says before they come to this board to bring their issue, they have availed themselves and they have exhausted Rule 16. We should not be in operational issues. I don't know the answers to that. If they come to me, I'm going to have to talk to Pat Nobby or Crystal or somebody else anyway. So yes, Carl, I would say that's an accurate perspective.
The one thing I have to bring up, Gordon Smiley emailed all of us about the PPP loans. I sent my response to all of you, and that Gordon thing, we'd probably talk, and finish saying we'd probably talk about that. Just as an overview of what that said to him, that was something that was discussed over a couple months, and Suzanne brought up the point that it was initially said that they thought it was going to take a while to do, and Suzanne corrected that, saying she had already fixed some. But during that time frame, we weren't in the big financial need yet. Hoosier had just pulled their application for one, and actually Jason probably could speak on that better. But we decided that because of that, it wasn't right for us to take funds away from a company that was in need. That's my understanding of what happened with that discussion. Like I said, I know Jason, being with Hoosier, might remember the Hoosier aspect of it better. But does anybody else have any comments on that for?
If nobody else does, you know I do. But here's my perspective, and talking to Eric at fairly length last week. And again, that was one of the issues that I remembered some of that conversation. I remember Suzanne, the issue came up about the time required to complete the application, and Suzanne commented that she had done, I don't know what the number was, but it was a pretty simple process. I further remember that the spirit of that program was to help those people who were in dire circumstances. And while we were suffering just like everybody else was, we weren't in dire circumstances in danger of closing our doors. Could we have applied? Probably. Could we have gotten a loan? Probably. Would we have had to pay it back? I don't know, because you realize also that these are only grants if you meet the response criteria that's requested, because then it's a loan, albeit a low interest loan. My perspective is the same thing with this, is the same when we talked about capitalizing the security project up here that we talked about in our special meeting last week with the capital credits. I, as a director, do not want to start living on the fringes. I don't want to start doing things because we can. If it's not right and it's not with the intent of what we're doing, then I don't want to do it. We talked about capitalizing the security thing up here. Could we have gotten by? Eric made it clear that it probably was not the best thing to do because we had just capitalized the ceiling of the parking lot. Could we have probably gotten by? Probably. But experience has taught me that when you start living on that edge, when you start living on that periphery, if you get caught one time and you're challenged on it, it will not be the last time. And the scrutiny is going to be much greater. That being said, I don't want to not do it because we might get caught. I want to do it because it's right and it's wrong. That is exactly why in our special meeting, I voted against the way we're distributing the money. Because I think we had an opportunity in front of us to distribute the money a month later in a consistent fashion with the way we've distributed money. That being said, we as a board voted. I'm all in favor. The spirit of what Suzanne did when she made that motion is the most noble thing I think we can do for our members. And we're doing it. And I'm perfectly fine with it. But I don't want to, as a director, start putting REMC out there and go, you know what? We can probably skirt by and never get caught. I don't want to do that. And that's how I remember the PPP issue.
And I would say now, if we would have took that and we were asked by someone think we'd have a hard time defending where gross margins are above, which means our revenues weren't really impacted. Our cash position was strong. It would have been a tough sell. I'm glad we got that decision.
The seventh cooperative principle is concern for community. And by us not accessing the funds, it allowed other businesses that needed the funds to access.
Yeah. Okay. Anybody else have any other takeaways from that meeting? Okay, the educational article. I'll be honest, I struggled with this article, so I don't know if anybody has any comments on it. Just following it, the legalities in it.
Attitudes.
So we will go on to move on to some Thank you, Dale. Our affiliated organizations. Next month, that's what I was thinking. Jason. Okay. Jason, do you have a report out from Hoosier?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
The report's on call to order, but the main takeaway is the work plan for 21 was passed as well as the budget. We're still on track to see a reduction in wholesale tire rates. We also approved $6.5 million capital credit retirement. We'll receive that around the first of the year. Donna will be scheduling her regular visit to present those funds. I'd like to stress to the board, not everyone attended last year, which was frankly kind of embarrassing. Hoosier represents 74% of our total expenses. They're our biggest vendor. And she's bringing us a check for $375,000. I think this board should at least participate. There is no committee meeting or board meeting in December, so we won't meet again until January.
Thank you, Jason. Okay. Steve, do you have a?
We had no meetings in November, but the annual meeting is coming up on December 7th virtually. So.
Right. Okay. Something I forgot to do with the agenda at the beginning. Dale, you requested to be put on with the which committee?
Broadband.
Broadband. Is everyone okay if we cover broadband quickly now?
We're not asking for action. It's just to kind of bring you up to speed. We good?
I think we're good.
Okay.
Have an issue? Sorry.
We've met a couple of 3 times, and I think we've made some good progress. We met with Eric and Crystal a couple of times, and Jeff's much more versed in the actuals of it. But conceptually, we're talking about trying to use Viasat and make it available to pretty much anybody that wants to use Viasat, and make it a service to them, potentially not losing money on it, but not necessarily making large margins, but making up for reduced margins, but just by sheer volume. So we've met a few times. We don't want to come to a meeting and ask for an action and say, here we are, let's vote. That's not our intent.
We hope to have that next month.
But just to get everybody up to speed. So I'll let Jeff or Brian.
Brian, why don't you go and then I'll follow up because I probably have more data. Or do you want me to go?
Let's go ahead. All right.
Okay. And that's fine. One of the things we dug into was the number of plans we had. And again, it's evolved 3 different systems. And we've never upgraded or changed any of those prior systems. And I've talked, just so everybody knows, last Friday I had Watch Communication install I'm up live on Watch. On Saturday, I installed Viasat so I could actually do comparisons. And because of my own stupidity, I already had Frontier and ETC wireless. So I'm comparing 4 different systems twice a day just to see what the reliabilities of these systems are. Because I, as a director, if I'm going to say Viasat works, I want to know it works. And I've been remarkably pleased. Again, I don't have all the exact same speeds, but I called in today and changed on my Viasat and bumped up the plan. I talked to Brian and Dale. I'm going to pay for the installation up front. I don't plan on keeping Viasat because broadband through Watch is better. There's no weather variance where you have that with Viasat. Last Sunday when it was overcast and cloudy, I went from 17 mega gigs going up to 3.5, but that 3.5 is still better than the other 2 that I've had for a year and a half that don't work. Talking to the installers, I had great conversations with both of them, but I said, so what happens when you get to a house and you set up a satellite? Because for Viasat, it points to the southwest. And I says, what happens if there's a tree interfering? And he says,
The southeast?
Southeast, I'm sorry, yes, southeast. He says, I've literally had customers get the chainsaws out and cut trees down because they need the service. He says, and knowing what I found out, we can provide satellite Viasat to every member that we currently have. Now, it's going to be up to them to get rid of the blockage. If there's a tree, if they want it bad enough, or if they need to put in a tower to get it, but we can get Viasat today to every member we have and offer high-speed internet. What we would like to do, and the 3 of us have talked, again, we would like to offer it at cost. Right now, we have a built-in margin. We have overhead that we're going to keep in, but we're looking at offering either pay for the installation up front with cash or offer an installation cost is $200. So if we offer a 20-month lease at $10 a month to our members, that gives them the chance to spread that out. And at the end of that lease, it goes to cost.
And we're not at risk.
And then we have no risk. Non-members, I would recommend we have them pay installation up front. So when they walk away, we have no loss.
That is great news for.
I am very impressed. Had I known this years ago, I'd be on Viasat right now and wouldn't have hooked it to Watch. But as it is doing the comparison, Watch is right on consistent, no matter the fog, no matter the rain. Viasat depleted. The other 2 definitely aren't. In my opinion, they struggle. And I think we all know that our home phone lines are going to be gone in the next 5 to 10 years because they're not being maintained. So Frontier, in my opinion, I'm not trying, again, I just wanted to stick with facts, and anybody else is welcome to do it. But again, knowing what I know about Viasat now, we need to be encouraging our members, especially if we offer it at cost. We're looking at, I think, $26,000 in margins last year. We have some of these plans that have a 40% market. It's crazy what we're charging them. Anyhow, I will be writing a check for my installation, and then I would like the employees to determine somebody who's in need of one, and I will pay to have my receiver installed at their facility if they can pick up the monthly charges. But I would like to keep it for another month just to get more data, because one of the things I think is if you go with the higher speed systems, your weather is going to be less effective. And I'd sent an email to Brett and Crystal to see if there's already data out there to prove that. But especially some of these packages that have unlimited data, it's a great opportunity if it's marketed.
And I'd say we've seen a huge pickup. I mean, we've had Viasat for this isn't new. We've had it around for a while. And
2004 is when it started. 2005 was the first year of any type of annual return.
And we've seen quite a few this year.
People have to have it. They're getting, where you have to have it. And if we can market this and offer, I truly am a believer in giving it at cost. And this is a community donation that we make.
Well, I think COVID has brought to the forefront just how important high speed is. Brian, I don't know if you want to say anything, but Eric, you were involved. Crystal, if you're still on there, if you'd care to share anything based on our conversations, you feel not obligated, but if you got anything you want to say.
I'm still here. No, I think you guys pretty much covered it.
Okay.
I'd agree.
There was one thing that Brian had a real concern with was how would this affect Crystal and her girls' workload? And she said she could implement it. This was back into October. She could implement it the 1st of November and go. So there's no bottleneck internally here.
Crystal, can you confirm that?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay. And from what we've talked about, we're not talking about an extra burden on your staff or anything, correct?
Nope. It's just the main setup. As soon as we would get everything set up on our side and get everything changed in the pricing, it's smooth. It's not a big deal at all. Yep.
We're all about you.
Thanks, Dale.
Thanks, Crystal.
Yep.
So hopefully next month we can all think about what we would be proposing to offer this at cost to the members we had talked possibly a $5 upcharge to non-members monthly. Keep it very basic, keep it affordable, support the community.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks for the opportunity, Michael. Appreciate it.
Sounds very promising to me, so I like it. Good work. Did the board accountability meet? I don't think they did. Okay.
Michael, we do not have a formal report. However, I would like to ask the board what their flavor is as far as the December 8th meeting and the meal. Are we still on board for doing that?
I believe we are. The meal on December 8th. Does anybody?
What's that now?
Providing the meal on December 8th.
I'm having sound space.
Because that's a morning meeting, correct? I'll be here for the morning, but that's.
So we'd be providing lunch for the staff is what we've been past years. We're still all good with that?
Yes. I hope so, Jason, because I've already mailed you my check.
We're good with it, Jason.
Yeah, promises, Dale.
Check's in the mail.
Okay, I'll wait by the mailbox.
Okay. I don't have it. Did anybody go to any training or conferences? Dale?
I attended CCD 2610 last Thursday, which is understanding the electric business. And I have now completed all 5 of my CCD classes. So,
congratulations. Okay. Anybody else?
Nope.
Okay. Then I would entertain a motion to adjourn to executive session. Yeah. Yes. Second.
I'll say who.
All in favor? Meeting adjourned.